Hi, guys. My name is Jason Thomas, and I serve as the African American Church Mobilization Strategist with the International Mission Board. And we're here to talk about prioritizing discipleship or making disciples on historically black colleges and universities. And I'm going to let my friends introduce themselves as we kind of begin.
My name is Michael Aguilar. My allergies are bothering me, so please forgive my voice. I've been serving as the Baptist Collegiate Ministry Director at Southern University for the past 3 years. I started in fall 2020.
My name is George Lee IV. I serve as the Baptist Collegiate Ministry Director at the Grambling State University. Again, the Grambling State University. Good to be here. Thank you, man.
And my name is Cece Lee. I serve as the Associate Director at Grambling State University as well as the Women's Director, and I'm glad to be here as well.
Yes, thank you guys for being here. One of the things that is important is that we're wanting to bring attention to the idea of making disciples on our historically black colleges and universities because this is something that's near and dear to me. I actually served here in Louisiana as well as a Baptist Collegiate Ministry Director. And so I'm just going to jump right in. This is a conversation between us and some of these questions that I'd love to hear your perspective on currently what you kind of dealing with on the campus, and also your hopes, some of those that are going to be what's hopefully going to happen with the students that you're making disciples of on these campuses. So firstly, I know that there are unique challenges that you're going to deal with that aren't the same type of challenges that you deal with on these majority culture campuses. So what are the unique challenges and opportunities that HBCU campuses present when it comes to discipleship and ministry?
I think that's a very, just to get straight to the point, it's a nuanced question because as I like to tell people, I'm an African-American man serving within the SBC for the BCM on an HBCU campus. And side note, I'm thankful for CP, but that's a whole lot of letters. And because of that, there has to be a nuanced approach. So some of the challenges is just the historical context of HBCUs, what they mean, their origin, and having some of our white brothers and sisters to understand that before we even start the journey of being missional on campus. So that's one thing in particular, maybe some others, but there's one thing in particular, just understanding the historical and cultural context on our HBCU campuses.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. In addition to that, one of the things that comes to mind for me when I'm on campus and doing evangelism is some of the unique apologetics issues that we have in our communities, like the Hebrew Israelites, the return to African spirituality, the Nation of Islam. I went to a PWI, predominantly white institution, and I had never met anybody from any of these organizations before. And so coming to an HBCU and trying to learn how to interact with them, understand their faith, understand what they believe, and learn how to share the gospel with them has definitely been a new experience.
You know, one thing we've seen, and sweetheart, you may want to weigh in on this. I say sweetheart because this is my wife, y'all. You may want to weigh in on this, is just the diverse spiritual backgrounds that we've had to connect with, minister to, and just kind of reining that in a little bit theologically.
Yeah. And I think too, we were talking about this earlier, but I think one of the things that I found being a product of a HBCU twice is that we've heard students tell us it just feels safe being at a HBCU. I've been in majority culture where I don't look like what I'm around, but when I'm on an HBCU campus, I feel safe. And so a lot of times what we'll find in discipleship making is that they will settle for safe. And we have to strive to push them out of their comfort zone to say, yes, this is safe, but God calls us to be uncomfortable. And we feel like he does his best work when we're uncomfortable. So that's kind of been our goal at GSU is to don't settle for safe. Like I understand it's safe, but let's not settle there.
I think we mentioned challenges and opportunities. I think one of the unique opportunities that we have serving at the HBCUs is that a lot of our HBCUs are not, they're located in areas that haven't really been reached by the SBC. And so it's a whole window into a new community for us as a denomination.
In some kind of ways, you can think of that, obviously, working with the International Mission Board as your unique mission field. And so one of the things that is when you think about this and you think about like your unique mission field coming alongside with the HBCU students, you're going to have to steer them towards missional activity and living missionally. So that's kind of the next question I'd really like for you guys to kind of to address. How do you address the historical and systemic barriers that impact the spiritual development of students at HBCUs and to work towards developing a missional culture?
I mean, I think we have to start slow. Discipleship in an HBCU context is crockpot ministry, if you will. And so many of those students won't be familiar with our Baptist polity or theology, even to a degree. And so talking about, who is Annie Armstrong? Who is Lottie Moon? Who is Georgia Barnett? Who are these missionaries? Who is George Lau? So starting from square one and really helping them to see how God created them ethnically and culturally on purpose and designed them on purpose. And that is not the priority. The priority is the gospel. I'm a believer before I'm black. And I don't turn off my blackness, but I'm a believer first. And so starting there and then showing them as some of our white brothers and sisters step out into some uncomfortability by being on campus and experiencing what it's like to not be the majority there. So starting there and just kind of journeying along and going slow, because some of the things that we know, a lot of our strategies, a lot of our models won't work like that, in an HBCU context.
And I think one of the things that comes to mind for me in regards to addressing historic or systemic issues would be it's important for us to build relationships with the university, with the administrators and the professors, because I believe in regards to, systemic issues, that's where I get the most pushback. You hear administrators say, we don't want, white people coming to campus. We're not a mission field, right? We don't want to feel like a mission field. And so I think it's important for us to build those relationships, to share the gospel, the vision cast for what it looks like for us to be on this campus, sharing the gospel with students and with the administrators as well to help overcome some of those barriers.
There has to be a degree of humility when you're talking about missional work. As we're planning to go on mission trips overseas, you're looking for a person of peace. You're taking the time to learn the culture. You're taking the time to connect so you don't create any barriers to belief. That same thing applies to missions work and ministry work on an HBCU campus.
And I think what you said about relationship matters. So we have a student that she went to CEC with us, and she is at a camp that they have in Austin, Texas. And so she called us, and this is a little bit vulnerable, but she called us a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "CC, I'm struggling." She said, "I'm around, none of these people look like me." And a conversation that was brought up that was very uncomfortable for her. And I said, you have to step into it. I said that you can't silence your voice. If you have an opinion about something, you speak up and don't silence your voice, because that's you stepping back, from who God has called you to be. If you feel a way and it made you feel a way and you just say, I'm going to glance over it because of where I'm around, it's like speaking up and using the voice that God has given you to stand up for those that can't speak up for themselves. And there's power in going first. She's one of the first students to go on for us being at Grambling, to go on a mission, to go out. And it's like you're setting a path for other students to follow behind you. So if you speak up and allow God to use your words and speak truth in love, then you open the door for so many other people along the way.
That's so good.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, kind of what you're saying, is the idea is to not allow them to become discouraged, but to be empowered. And so that's one of those effective strategies that works in a specific contexts like HBCUs, especially because the predominant culture in the Southern Baptist Convention is Anglo. So, but there are some other unique strategies I'm sure that you can employ, or that you do employ on these campuses. And so that brings me to my next question. What are some effective strategies or models for discipleship that have been successful in engaging students at HBCUs?
Yeah, so I would just say, just for me, what I like to focus on is just 4 things, having, or 5 now with this new generation. I had to add something, but having a quiet time, doing scripture memory, learning how to do evangelism, and learning how to fellowship and learning how to pray. I think all those things are important. And I think sometimes if we just focus on the basics, it can really go a long way in regards to discipleship.
Just piggybacking off of what you said, Mike, one of the things that we do on our campus, the yard on an HBCU campus, it is the hub of communal life. It is Mars Hill, if you will. And so one of the things that we do that we've started is something called Prayer on the Yard. And so we connect this spiritual discipline of prayer, vibrant prayer on our campus with this place on campus. Now, we know our prayer is not just restricted to that one place, but creating that culturally on our campus has caused students to be more intentional about developing their prayer lives. So every Tuesday at 12 p.m., there's Prayer on the Yard. Our administration shows up. Student athletes show up, our coaches show up, Cece's there praying for the young ladies. Guys may walk by. We're kind of outnumbered disproportionately on within our BCM, and so we're like 98% female. Y'all pray for us, help us outside of the outside of the football team, and so. But prayer on the yard is one way in particular. One other way, and then I'll let somebody else weigh in. YouVersion, the Bible app. For people who don't know, YouVersion is a great tool because it will allow you to do Bible studies with large groups and even comment and weigh in. So we will do group studies on campus. You have to verify those studies, of course, but we'll do group studies on campus, and students will get into the habit of reading the word over the course of a week or two. And it's like, okay, when the study ends, don't stop. Weave that into the normal rhythms and patterns of your life.
And one of the things that I've found with the women, we have a women's small group that they ask for, like, we need to just get together. Women like to get together and we like to talk. So one of the things that we found is that they've struggled with identity, who I am in Christ. And so social media has tapped into that and all those things. And so it's like you're not identified by any of that. And so we did a lot of studies on the armor of God and, seeing ourselves through the eyes of Christ. And that's helped in us making disciples on campus as well.
Yeah, I know that probably one of those biggest struggles, not just for HBCU students, but definitely is identity, value, and significance. And so one of the things that is true, especially when they come into spaces where they're the minority, is they're wanting to look for their identity and their significance. So that's really good that you're kind of modeling those strategies in such a way. But obviously, one of the greatest thoughts that I'm thinking is the Great Commission. And we want to be able to paint a picture for our students of where they're going. And so this question I have is, how can we ensure that our discipleship efforts are not just transactional, but transformative, and focusing on helping students embrace the Great Commission, the call that they all have?
I heard Brother Frank say last night at the George Lau banquet, oh man, and I don't know if he got this from somebody else, but I'm going to steal it from him on camera. I'm letting y'all know I'm going to take it from him. Yeah. He said the Great Commission is not just about reaching the lost, it's about teaching the found. And so many of our students come to campus having some semblance of a spiritual background, but they've never been developed in the sense of sharing the gospel, for example. And it's like, hey, that is critical. You may have the best relationship with Jesus, but if you can't tell another person how to have that relationship with Jesus, if you can't, of course, the Holy Spirit does the work, but if you can't lead them into a relationship with Christ, we need to work on that. We need to equip you, and then you need to get out of your comfort zone and be willing to do that. And so challenging them to have gospel conversations and things of that nature, that is significant.
Yeah, and I think in regards to having something that's not just transactional, but something that's more relational, I think you have to really make an effort to have these authentic relationships with people. Sit down, have them over for dinner, sit down, talk with them, get to know who they are, get to know their background, because there's so many stories, there's so much that has molded people in their life. And I think if we can learn that, we can learn how to better, help them share their testimony and move that Great Commission forward.
That's good.
Well, I was going to say, too, a lot of times I think in ministry we use the term we have to, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. And one of the philosophies that we've taken on with our family is that we get to. And so we've even told students, God can use anybody, but he chose to use you. And we get to share the gospel. We get to be the hands and feet of Christ. And I think in instilling that in them, it empowers them to say, you know what, I get to wake up this morning, go look out and see who can I bring closer to God by living the way he's called me to live.
One other transformational piece too is that, we do ministry as a family, on our campus. Like I said, we're 98% female. And so I appreciate having accountability for sure. I told our students, our female students, hey, if there's something you can talk to me about pretty much anything. There's certain things though that you need to bring to CC. And there have been meetings, Bible studies that we've had at our house. The Bible study is over. I'm putting the kids down for bed because the ladies are around the table talking with Cece, asking her questions about life, about family, so all of that is discipleship, and it's transformational because they're in it and they're seeing it,
No, that's good. That's good. And that one thing that obviously, as all of you guys are supported by your state convention, and those dollars are cooperative program dollars. And so one of the more important things that we want to do for our students, I know, is to get them connected to a local body. So what are the ways that you see that are effective to help your students get more connected to a local body?
So for me, what we've done this past year, so what I did one year was I tried to bring the students around to different churches each Sunday. And that wasn't very fruitful. But what I've done this past year is instead of me leading all of the Bible study lessons, I have the pastors from the different churches coming and leading the lessons. They'll come with some of their people. A lot of times they'll bring food. And the students, they'll come to Bible study next week. Hey, what was that pastor's name? I want to go to his church. Do you have his business card? Or do you remember a couple of weeks ago? I'm like, a couple of weeks ago. And so that has been really helpful in regards to, I see more students getting plugged in, going to church, riding a church together. So, yeah.
I think, for us, and if I can be very, very transparent, and I don't want to get too emotional, and I don't want to get fired, of course, for sure. But my church, Temple Baptist Church, for example, when I first got there, the name of our college ministry was called Temple Tech. Louisiana Tech University, Ruston, but Lincoln Parish is a two-college town. So you have Louisiana Tech University, and just up the road you have Grambling State University. And so one of the things that I mentioned in our first staff retreat is, hey, we want to be intentional about reaching our community and all of the college students in our community, but our college ministry is called Temple Tech. We want to reach Grambling, but our college ministry is called Temple Tech. And it's a question that had come up before, to be quite honest with you, but our church was so adamant on reaching students on an HBCU campus that they really abandoned so many years of tradition. And there's there's so much emotion that goes into the name of that college ministry. But they changed the name from Temple Tech to Temple College because they wanted to be missional. And so to answer your question, there are things that we need to do to prepare the students, but there are also some things that we have to do to prepare our churches to receive our students and create an environment that's welcoming, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally. You may not have a welcoming environment for students on an HBCU campus. And so one of our roles as a campus missionary is to have that conversation and say, hey, what does this look like? What does this atmosphere look like? Is this welcoming? What is the name of this ministry? To kind of facilitate that process a little bit.
And I think one of the things we encourage is to lean into the awkwardness. So we have Prayer on the Yard, as George mentioned, and so we will have a diverse group of pastors from the community to come to Prayer on the Yard. So students are looking at us and like, okay, where they come from? But it's understanding that we have to lean into the awkwardness because we're all in this together. And so those are some ways as well to go along with what George said. Just lean into it and let God work.
And practical, another practical thing, having lunch in the cafeteria on an HBCU campus. You know, you're gonna get a really good deal. You're not gonna pay as much as you would pay at a restaurant, and the food is gonna be good. And so,
exactly.
you know, we have students now looking up like, who are all of these people eating in the cafeteria? They're like, we like to come here. They have the best salad bar, but you're creating that missional environment relationally.
Right. And one of the assumptions could be, because you're in the HBCU, that you want your students to go to historically black churches. And that's not always the best assumption, especially when it comes to we're all a part of a body of churches that are not just African American, they're also Anglo. And so we don't just need our African American churches to be able to welcome those students. We also need some of our predominantly white churches to welcome those students, to also love on them, and to be a place where they can feel safe. So in that vein, what are some ways that predominantly white churches or individuals can foster genuine relationships and build trust with these students of diverse backgrounds at HBCUs? And I know you addressed one of those.
Yeah, I think it goes back to just, you know, how do you make a friend, you know? Spend time with somebody, have them over for dinner. We're Southern Baptists, we like to go fishing, hunting. A lot of my students have never been fishing or hunting before, and so that's been an opportunity. But just spending time with someone, I think, is one of those things that just helps build trust. I've had churches come and they'll do our outreaches with us. So they'll take some of my students out one by one, do evangelism, pray with them, pray with people. And my students have really enjoyed that and made some connections with people in those churches.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I have to brag on the church. I have to brag on Temple because that's where God has led us. But I remember when George first told us that's where God was leading us, I was like, certainly not. Like,
Don't
out
give
of
me
all
five.
places,
Please don't give me
it
five.
was certainly not. But I have to say, since walking through those doors, I grew up in a small black community, and it was just very closed-minded. And so some of the things that I was taught as a child, I had to unlearn growing up. But that environment, like you said, true friendship, people knocking on our door, here's a casserole, just leaning into that. And it has been the best experience. Some of my best friends have come from that me leaning into what God has called us to. And I just imagine if I had not leaned into it. And so that's what I inspire the students that are around us. Like, if I'm at a table, I'm bringing you to it as well. And we're going to enjoy this meal together, because I believe in bringing more to the table to experience the same love that I experienced walking through the doors of churches that don't necessarily look like what I look like. But it has been an amazing experience.
Yeah.
I think there has to be a degree of humility, because for all of our strategies and models and content, you have people who are just a wealth of knowledge. When you're stepping onto an HBCU campus, you have to be humble enough to say, my cup is already full. Mr. Miyagi, you got to pour some of that out if you want to learn, because you're stepping onto a campus and it's really a co-learning environment. You're not, hey, we're going to save those students. Well, first of all, Jesus does the saving. Last time I checked, the Holy Spirit does the saving. And so he just invites us to be a part of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so stepping onto the campus and being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable. Hey, you don't have to bring a team of students the first time. Pastor, hey, look, let's just go and have lunch. Hey, where do I eat? Where do I get my plate? What do I do? What are some of the customs here? All of that is healthy, because one, it gives you insight into how these students feel in other areas of life. And then two, you are able to cultivate meaningful relationships, sometimes better one-on-one than with a team of people. And in our context in Grambling, there isn't another SBC church in Grambling. The closest church, diverse church, would be the Springs, where I have the privilege of serving as planters, multi-generational, multicultural, and multi-ethnic. But even there, students won't be the majority. And so I think we just have to, our pastors and ministers have to be willing to go first to a degree, empty that cup and say, hey, I'm just here to learn. I'm here to listen. The gospel does not change. The gospel will never change, but the context has changed. And so I have to be willing to learn a little bit.
No, it's good. And we're kind of wrapping up a little bit. So before we do, though, I would love to hear from each of you some of the highlights of not just the challenges, but some of the things that you love about serving on these HBCU campuses, and what's unique to the experience that you can to see once these students get it.
That's a good question.
I can go first. I think being a Grambling grad, both times, it's just for me, it's a joy to be able to serve the campus where I grew as a woman, where I grew as the wife I am now, the mom I am now, and where my life changed completely. I just think about the day I stepped on Grambling State University, and I was just telling someone, I was like, I wouldn't think that I would still be there all these years later, but it's a privilege for me to be able to serve and see students say, I get it now. I'm walking in relationship with Christ, and just seeing students rededicate their lives to Christ, and see students say, I want to live on mission, and I want to share the gospel, and if I have to go first, I'll do it. It does my heart. Even seeing my own kids, like I'm going to Grambling State University. It really doesn't matter to me where they go, but just to see them, see us walking in that and being fulfilled, because I can get emotional about it, but Grambling means so much to me because so much of who I am and that's where my life changed. That's where I met and rededicated my life to Christ. And so to be able to do that for others has did so much for me as well.
I think, for me, one of the highlights is seeing those light bulbs come on, for a student that, hey, I've never shared my faith. So many believers journey through life never being able to say, I witnessed to someone and the Holy Spirit used me to lead someone to Christ. And so for students to do that in the light bulb come on, for students to actually understand their Bible and not just read it because grandmama told me to read it. And it's like, hey, what are you reading? I'm reading the King James Version because grandmama said that's the only version that you can read. And if you're not reading that, you're not reading the real Bible. And I feel like, Philip, do you understand what you're reading? It's like, no, but I'm reading it. It's like, but to see students actually grow in their faith, prayer, Bible reading, sharing their faith, that's fulfilling for me.
I think for me, one of the joys comes from knowing that, as I've gone on this journey, I've recognized that a lot of the HBCUs, we don't get the same attention from different denominations across the board. A lot of them are lacking campus ministries, in the volume that we have at some of these other schools. And so just even being at Southern, we're one of the few that's like really active with a full-time campus minister that's there and working with the students. And so it's exciting to know that I'm part of that, part of making this difference that kind of on this bigger scale than I would have thought that I would have been able to make.
Yeah. And that's good. And obviously I have the privilege of knowing you guys and knowing the work that you're doing, and also knowing that you're parents to young children. And so how can we, as we begin to wrap up a little bit, how can we be praying for you guys, for your ministry and for your families?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest prayer would just be that work-life balance. I have a 1-year-old. He just turned 1 and just started walking. My wife also works. I'm also a seminary student. And Southern is not the only campus that I'm working on. And so just that work-life balance, not doing too much of one or too little of another, that's my biggest prayer. It's been one of my biggest personal challenges.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Mike said, one of the things I talk about, just be praying for me that I would minister out of my overflow. I never want my kids to hear in the community, man, your dad is awesome and your dad is doing this. And for them to say, yeah, he's all right, but me give them the leftovers. I want heart-home community. I want everybody else to get the leftovers. And sometimes leftovers are better the next day, but that I would truly minister out of my overflow, that I would love the Lord, love my wife, love my kids in that order, and then that I would minister to the rest of the campus out of that overflow. That's my prayer.
All right, awesome.
And I think I echo that prayer, that we would have the strength to keep going, because some days are a little heavier than others, but I'm grateful for the journey we're on. So just strength and peace as we walk this journey that God has called us to walk on with managing kids. And I'm at home and working with George with BCM, but just managing it all and doing what God has called us to do.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for number one, accepting the idea of talking about the ministry that you're a part of. And obviously I see the passion that you have. And so I want to thank you for being on this panel. And I want to thank you guys for listening and being a part of this discussion with us. And just remember, the historically black colleges and universities that have these Baptist collegiate ministries need your support and need your help. And they represent, like, there's some of the best leaders here that represent some of the best of what's going to happen in the future in mobilizing our students to the nations. Thank you.